Hi everyone, and welcome to the All Things ITSM Global Podcast. I'm Kirsty McGowan, and I'm here today with Charlie Betts. Hi Charlie.
Hi Kirsty.
And Mark Smalley. Nice to have you here again, Mark.
Yeah, greetings from Amsterdam.
And today we are talking with Abbas Haider Ali from xMatters. Great to have you here, Abbas.
Thanks for having me on.
Hi Abbas, great to talk to you, and I am very intrigued by xMatters. The concept of collaboration and communication those concepts are very important in DevOps and Agile development, and it seems like you have some very interesting offerings in this space. Could you tell us a little bit more about your core offerings and how they enable these new practices of DevOps and Agile?
Sure. So as a little bit of background, xMatters has been around for some time, and really our core business has always been about getting information into the right hands of people just when they need it, leaving them out when they don't, and allowing them to take actions and move their process forward. IT has been kind of a core for us for a long time. We've been around, we've worked with everything from classical in the ITIL transformations, optimizing incident management and change management, and now we're seeing another transformation take place in how organizations run the technology part of their business, and that's with DevOps. And really interestingly, communications there is actually more important than it has been in the past. If you imagine taking groups of people who don't necessarily always collaborate the best together, developers and operations teams, having them talk more effectively together certainly goes a long way. So the classical example I like to give for this is if you're a developer, it historically hasn't been something that you're on call and getting woken up in the middle of the night because something's gone wrong. That's the operations team's headaches. But that changes when you start to move into a world that is very agile in nature. You build applications very quickly, you throw them out very quickly, you have a whole transformation from old school waterfall software development and running of IT into a world that we've gone from continuous integration to continuous delivery and now to continuous deployment, where everyone really is responsible for the operational nature of the service all the time. So you have to find a better way to engage those people. The old problems of sending out emails and waking up people in the middle of the night within operations, that doesn't scale when your population grows larger. The number of issues that can happen actually get bigger. So you have to get smarter in how you actually run the business of IT. And that's where we find communication is becoming more and more important. And as an adjunct to that, you want better integrations as well. Better integrations into all the tools that actually use to running for IT, not just service management, not just your operations tools, but everything from your application performance tools to log management to security to release management, code check-in. All those now have to be connected with better communication to make, especially in an enterprise, make DevOps actually work.
Yeah, does that mean that the kind of enterprises that are looking at your products and services are generally the more larger sized? Because you talked about the scaling problem.
Yeah, so I would certainly say there's a little bit of a selection bias in that question because our customers tend to be larger enterprises. We certainly have a whole range. We've got companies that are on the order of hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue and hundreds of employees, all the way into the largest companies, literally the largest companies in the world with hundreds of thousands of employees. And we have to kind of be able to scale along both sides. So that does certainly happen. Now, interestingly, if you look at a traditional, very large enterprise, DevOps is not typically something that they're doing across their whole organization. They have legacy applications, legacy systems, legacy tools. Really where we see DevOps really catching on is going to be in parts of their business that are transforming very quickly. An example I like to give this is we've all heard the adages at this point of software is eating the world. Then you hear mobile is eating the world. My general takeaway from that is technology is just hungry and eats everything. If you're a very large company, there is someone who is gunning for you. And kind of this goes back to this classical stories of if you're a large enterprise, there is a startup somewhere that is going to eat your lunch. And as a result, we see very large enterprises taking core parts of their business that they feel at risk and saying, we need to do better there. And technology is one way where they can actually do that, be more creative, be more innovative. And what they're doing is saying our classical approach there doesn't work. So they carve out in kind of the forest of obstructions that it takes for a very large enterprise to move quickly, they carve out a clearing. And part of that clearing is agile development, and a DevOps mechanism of how they run things, and that tends to be a use case within our larger customers. Now, we still work with a lot of customers who are doing things in a classical way, but enterprise DevOps, that clearing is where all the action is right now, and that's where we find a lot of our larger customers using our technology.
So, Abbas, this is awesome. I have been looking at this scaling problem, and Mark alluded to that as well. It certainly is an ongoing topic in DevOps and Agile as we look at its implementation in larger companies. One of the challenges with communications channels, whether you're old school or new school, they tend to get overloaded. You tend to see just too much stuff, from the employee bulletin board in the cafeteria to email storms, and auto ticketing storms, to oversubscribed Slack channels. I mean, the technology doesn't prevent you from having poorly managed channels. So what do you do for that problem?
So it's funny you say that, right? So if you look at what we've gotten really good at is coming up with new communication channels, and then eventually those communication channels become the breaking point. So I'll give you an example with Slack in particular, right? So we actually use Slack at xMatters, and it's funny if you do a Google search on people who are like, "This is amazing, Slack has cut down on my email noise," there was a spike on that and kind of still continues to grow. But there's actually a growing spike of people who say, Slack is now distracting the heck out of me. I can't get anything done. There's too many Slack messages. So now what we need is typically there's another communication channel we'll need. And my greatest fear actually is that we're actually going to come up with a communication channel that's some sort of brain implant, and then we're really stuck because there's no way out at that point.
No, certainly not.
And in practice, what this means is if we go back, and I used to do operations for a number of years. I started my career at IBM, and that's kind of when I was exposed to a lot of this sort of stuff. So I've been a victim of this in practice within pretty large organizations. And one of the tricky things is you have a scenario of over-alerting. And this started with email because it was so easy. You'd simply say, well, something's gone wrong. We should send a message to someone just to make sure it's covered. Just send it to a distribution list. And what happened is you send an email out, and it goes out to everybody, and it's you become immune to it. You simply say, and I've actually literally done this. I'm no longer at IBM, so I can say this without any fear of getting in trouble. I just had a filter that said, take all those emails and just throw them in the trash. Because if it's really important, someone is going to use another mechanism to get my attention. There's simply too much noise. So one of the biggest things that we focus on is, although we provide communication across lots of communication channels, we can use email, telephony, SMS, mobile application pushes. If an organization is running their team using a chat ops sort of theme, we can use a lot of chat tools as well. Our goal actually is not to simply make it really easy to throw information into the communication channel, because that just makes the problem worse. One of our biggest value points is how do we actually get much smarter about who we're going to send the message to. And that's actually one of the elements it's one of the ingredients of the secret sauce within xMatters, if you will. So we go about and gather lots of organizational information, and at scale, that means tying into lots of different enterprise data sources, everything from HR systems to directory services, even things like CMDBs, right? We can actually have people as CIs that are tagged to things, looking at project data, looking at release management tools where we want to know who actually worked on this application last, who made the last change, and grabbing all that data and making it part of the pipeline at the stage when we say, okay, we need to get a message to someone, but who is that someone? Grabbing all that data and then determining, using it and adding on top of it things like, okay, now we've narrowed it down to a team. On that team, who's on call, who's their backup, are they on vacation, what's the best device to reach them at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday versus in the middle of the day on a Wednesday. Using all that data, we're actually trying to reduce the sheer number of messages that go out and targeting them to a person. And that person piece is very important. It comes into accountability. If you think about a message going out to 50 people, there's no personal accountability because you're set at 50 people. Who's the person who should respond? When I narrow down the targeting, what I drive is a cultural change that says when you get a message, it's your responsibility. And that's a very, very close alignment with DevOps as a cultural practice, because you want to empower people to do things very quickly and be responsible for things on their own. So there's a great alignment there that we found, and it's certainly a technology element to enable it, but the biggest thing that we find for a lot of organizations is the cultural element of adopting that and making that a core part of how they run their teams.
Yeah, well, it was Peter Drucker who said culture eats strategy for breakfast. So it's sort of back to your technology eats everything.
Right.
Now, You're trying to out-druck a drucker. Good luck to you. Now we're running out of time, and I think there's something that will be on our audience's mind. What are those two intriguing items on the window ledge behind you?
So I'll point those out. So one of those you'll note, I'll grab these here, so excuse a little slide here. I'll grab one. This is, I actually just recently moved into a new office here, so I haven't fully finished decorating. But this is one of the core items that comes with. This is a Frosted Flakes, Tony the Tiger of the Frosted Flakes themed slippers. This came as a result of a presentation that I did with the Kellogg Company at a Gartner event a few months ago. And this is kind of one of those things. And they all make fun of me because I'm actually very loyal to a cereal, and that happens actually to be Frosted Flakes. I've had Frosted Flakes about 90% of the mornings of my life since I was very, very young, and it just never changed.
Breaking news! You heard it here.
Right. and the other item is a pointing stick. So I kind of carry this with me in my office. Green is the xMatters thematic color, in case you're wondering. And it's one of those random things that someone got for me because apparently I'm part Italian and I speak a lot with my hands. And they figured, sometimes I'm so busy waving my hands around that I can't point at things. So I was given a random green themed pointer that I can just kind of use and just point at things when I need them. So those are the two random. There's actually quite a collection of other random items, but they haven't quite moved into my office just yet. But thanks for hosting.
We'll have to get you back some other time.
We've got just a couple more. I just have to say I like what you've been saying. That communication and that oversharing has been and it actually doesn't matter if it's a large enterprise or a small business. As soon as the information starts going to too many people, people start ignoring it.
Right.
I mean, it's and then it gets to nobody. And you wonder why nobody's listening to you, and it's because you are oversharing and sharing to the wrong people.
And we've really spent a lot of time today talking primarily about communicating to the people that are the primary responsible parties. So responders, fix agents. Think about that actually represents a tiny fraction of the number of people in an organization. If you think about other people who need to be in the know, if you will, you're talking about stakeholders, executives, customers, partners, providers, even regulators, depending on the industry you're talking about. Any sort of IT thing, as it becomes more and more, as technology is now core to pretty much every business that's out there, those things can impact a lot of parties. And one of the things that we spend a lot of time talking about is how can you make this a multi-stage communication process that when it reaches certain thresholds, whether it's automated or someone makes a determination it's time to do it, how do you better disseminate information out to those teams as well, where your population now is actually significantly bigger. And over-communicating there is a bad thing because you give people the idea that things are always broken or they stop paying attention. And if you miss someone, you actually trigger a lot of inbound activity. People saying, hey, did you know this is broken? A classical example would be any telecom provider you can pick. When something goes wrong, how many calls they get into their help desk saying, I have a problem. And the first thing a lot of people hear is there's an outage in your area that we know about it. But instead of proactively communicating back out, they're waiting for people to call them, which is one, expensive and creates a terrible service perception. And as technology becomes part of what everyone does on a daily basis, that's kind of a really interesting area that we're focusing on to go through and say, okay, we've done a really good job of making the communication the first tier of people and to deal with things very effective. But there's actually a much larger population. I'm going to spare everyone like a picture of an iceberg here and throw one of those out. But there's a whole other group of people who we need to go back and do a better job of communicating to as well. And that's an area of focus for us as well.
Great. Hey, look, we definitely have to get you back on. I think there's a whole raft of DevOps-related subjects that we could chat about quite happily, but we'll have to sign off for today. But I'm definitely going to look at the schedule and get you back, Abbas, and we'll talk about some other topics as well. That was a really interesting chat today, and thanks a lot for your time. Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Charlie. It's been great having you here today.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsty.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I look forward to our next session.
Yeah, excellent.